is that time of the week to talk about the most talked about topics making headlines. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fresh Outlook. I'm Mia Toschi. Always nice to have your company. Well, I sat here last week and said, I hope we won't be talking about the government shutdown, but it seems like Democrats and Republicans are still battling it out on the Hill. So here we are again. So yes, our panel will be weighing in on what's happening in Washington. We're also going to chat about the biggest immigration rally so far that was held this week, with several members of Congress even getting arrested. We'll switch gears and also talk about a violent attack on a family involving a group of motorcycle riders. Now, if you haven't seen this video yet, it is absolutely shocking. But what's even more shocking is some New York City police officers were involved in this brazen attack. And we'll wrap things up with a lightning round with some celebrations this week. Ford has its 100th anniversary. Some Nobel Prize winners have lots to celebrate. And even though she wasn't awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, the Pakistani teen activist known as Malala made the rounds, speaking with Jon Stewart and President Obama this week. But first, we turn to the government shutdown. The White House and House Republicans say they are committed to talking about ways to avoid a default on the U.S. debt. It's the first concrete sign of hope, but it has still been more than 10 days, and many Americans are now growing weary of the partisan bickering.
A new poll suggests that Americans are finding little they like about the Republicans or the Democrats. The AP-GFK poll found that 7 in 10 view the Republican Party and the Tea Party movement unfavorably. Meantime, about half have an unfavorable view of the president and his Democratic Party. Few of those surveyed in the poll approve of the way President Barack Obama is handling most major issues. They say Obama is not decisive, strong, honest, reasonable, or inspiring. 4 out of 5 people surveyed described the GOP as unlikable, dishonest, and not compassionate, refreshing, inspiring, or innovative. The numbers offer warning signs for every lawmaker running for re-election. If these angry sentiments stretch into next year, the 2014 elections could feel much like the 2006 and 2010 midterms. That's when being affiliated with Washington was considered toxic by many voters. In 2006, voters booted Republicans from power in the House and Senate. And in 2010, they fired Democrats, who had been controlling the House.
Well, the looming question is whether a short-term agreement to raise the debt ceiling will come at the expense of reopening the government and the hundreds of thousands of federal workers who remain furloughed. And to talk more about what we welcome right now, former White House aide Dee Dee Benkie. We also have Paul Oster, CEO of Better Qualified, and media analyst Jackie Guzda. And we welcome all three of you to the show. And you know, we sat here last week and we were somewhat joking, saying, boy, I hope we're not here again talking about this. But here we are. And it's really, I think Americans are certainly growing a little bit weary. Let's weigh in on where everybody feels right now. We'll start with you, Paul.
Well, again, you know, it's a travesty that we're still here. It's a travesty that we got to a shutdown in the first place. But at least we're talking and negotiating. We went from the blinking, the staring contest. A couple of sides started to blink here and there, and now at least we have movement. Whether it's either way, you know, is yet to be told. But we do see some movement.
And we certainly want to get your perspective on the dollars and cents of what's going to be happening as well, if we don't come to some sort of an agreement. Jackie, your thoughts right now? You're shaking your head. You don't look too happy right now. One of the many Americans who are not happy right now, we might say.
Right. I think we're starting to feel the effects of the shutdown. As we said last week, the ripple effect has happened. Not only the 800,000 people who are furloughed from the United States government, but all those people, all those businesses that are associated with them, the coffee shops, the motels near the parks that were shut down. There were a couple of things that happened this week. The death benefits for the Afghan soldiers who came home, unfortunately, in coffins. Those death benefits were cut off. Everybody was up in arms about it. Things are just terrible. And
on a personal note, I actually knew one of those soldiers returning this week. Very, very sad, but they were reinstated, and we certainly hope that that it stays that way. Dee Dee, Just weigh in on what happened this week.
Look, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. We have been at this place so many times over and over again about how we get to the debt ceiling and nothing goes anywhere. So I think it's good that they're forced to come together and try to take a scalpel to the problems. I don't think it's a bad thing at all. And actually, still, Obamacare is something Americans don't want, and that's what the Republicans are fighting for. I think they should stand strong, and so be it. You know, we've had problems, and there's been a stalemate the entire time President Obama has been there. So if things are starting to move good, if they're forced to come together, fine.
Let's talk about the poll numbers, as we heard in that report. Depending upon which poll, we might say also, we do have a CNN International poll that says Republicans are taking more heat than the Democrats. 63% are angry at Republicans, 53% at Democrats, and more than half at President Obama. Not good for the country, though, Dee Dee.
Well, no, and not necessarily in the short term, but perhaps long term, because think about it. We get here over and over again, an Obamacare sweeping policy, one of the biggest sweeping policies our country's ever seen, and we think, Republicans think it's a bad policy. Americans don't like Obamacare. They don't want it. Right now, the numbers for Obama are in the tank. They are for Republicans, Democrats. Yes, now people are not happy with Washington, but perhaps this forces them to move forward and do something positive.
Paul, financial standpoint, Obamacare, do you think that most Americans are going to embrace this at this point? And of course, the big question everybody always has is how do you pay for this?
Well, whether they embrace it or they get it shoved down their throat are two different things. Just today, I saw a report on the waiting times in doctors' offices. The Democrats have certainly not thought this thing all the way through. Again, I'm the first person to say there are some very good parts about Obamacare that make sense to all of us. But when you go to implement such a wide-sweeping piece of legislation that admittedly was not read, was not studied, was not brought through all the way to the end, we're in trouble. As you and I and everybody in this room right now, we are in trouble when it comes to going to see our own doctor, getting the same health care that we have been provided thus far. Those days are over. It's going to be a much different landscape moving forward.
Well, let's talk about this debt ceiling. And we were hoping we weren't going to be here this week, but if we are here again next week, we could see a whole new ball game in terms of this debt ceiling. Talk to me about the dollars and cents of what could happen.
Well, there's somewhat of a, again, political grandstanding going on here. We can pay our bills. As of right now, the treasuries have enough monies coming in through tax revenue that we could pay the interest that's due to all of our creditors today.
So but how long will that last?
It can last, for quite some time. The problem is if we don't raise the debt ceiling, there's no new spending appropriations. That's the bottom line. So the Democrats are using the fiscal cliff and the debt limit as a political bargaining chip, like the Republicans are using Obamacare.
But let me ask you a question, and this is I'm going to ask to all of you. Maybe not everybody completely understands the debt ceiling. Do you think that the Democrats and Republicans are, splashing this across the headlines to just scare the American people into calling up their Congress members? Paul, you're shaking your head yes.
Absolutely.
We'll start with you.
This is greatly sensationalized propaganda, for sure. At the end of the day, we are in pretty good shape fiscally. We can pay our bills. Again, if we don't raise the debt limit, it means there's no new appropriations or spending, which is a good thing.
It is a good thing. We've had too much spending, good.
But, in all due respect, Paul, every single economist that I have heard, top-notch economists on the news, to a person has said that this debt ceiling, not raising it, is catastrophic. And they explained it in terms that were a little more frightening than yours.
How many catastrophes are going to have? We hear about this every quarter. Oh, we're on the brink, another catastrophe.
There's a reason why we're having
it.
I don't believe
of
it.
Paying, it's not just that, but leaving too much more, having more debt than we can absorb. That's certainly a concern, I think, of many people.
And that's what happens. We keep raising it and more debt, and we just cannot sustain it. And the buck's got to stop somewhere.
So the economists are saying if we don't raise it, there won't be monies for expansion and growth. With unemployment as an underlying problem. But there are two sides to that coin for sure.
Look, it's October. The Republicans have backed the Democrats into a corner and said, look, if you don't defund Obamacare, we're going to hold the economy hostage, and we are not going to, let me finish, please. We are not going to raise the debt ceiling. Let me ask you both, how many times did the Democrats ask the Republicans for a meeting about the budget from April until October?
I don't know
how
what
many
you're talking
times?
about, Jackie.
Let me explain it.
Harry Reid is the person holding everybody hostage, and President Obama is the one calling names.
times.
All right,
Under the
Harry Reid.
Constitution.
Again, one second. Harry Reid is the one that's
He's saying,
causing
forget it. Forget
No,
it. He's
look,
going to act like a baby.
19
Who are you
times.
blaming then?
I'm blaming the Republicans, and I'll explain why. Because you're right, we are in crisis mode after crisis mode. That was part of the strategy of the Republican Party. An article came out by the New York Times this week that showed that in the last few months, ever since April, it has been a strategy. They had a big meeting.
whose
Let me
strategy? Who
finish,
said that?
please, and I'll explain it. It was a big strategy, which was funded by the Koch brothers, the big billionaires on Forbes' list, who said, we are going to shut down the government to defund Obama because we have exhausted every other way to do it.
Well, under the Constitution, it's the House's job
Yes.
to originate spending bills and appropriations.
Right.
You know how many they have presented to the Democrats? That did not-
43, and they didn't have the votes to pass.
But they didn't. They weren't all saying you need to defund Obamacare. They said let's delay it.
Delay it.
Let's take
delay
a
it.
look at
No,
it.
you
Wait,
both
wait. Let's go back. Jackie, they did. That is a fact. They
Yeah.
did
So-
say
43
delay.
times, and I agree.
And here we just did it again. Yesterday we came up with another bill, a spending bill that did not
Another
defund
bogus
it.
bill. Let me ask
Well-
you a question.
Wait,
Why would you go with delaying the bill, Obamacare? Why would you go with
Because no
delaying
one
it?
Because it's
understands
not ready
it.
for
No
prime
one's
time.
ready.
No,
No one's
because
studying
you
it.
know-
Wait. Let Paul finish.
Yeah.
And I do think that there is a true a misunderstanding, if you will. I think people are very confused by Obamacare. Not the American people, but if you take a look at all those polls, more than 60% say they just don't
The
understand.
Republicans
why
should
we're here
hire
to discuss.
better pundits and marketing people because they're getting blamed for something that is really, it's both their faults, let's put it that way. But at the end of the day, the Republicans continue to produce bills that could get passed by the Senate that would not defund Obamacare, it would delay it. And it would give everybody a chance to study it and say, okay, this is what's going to happen in the first 6 months. We know the website's not going to work correctly.
Well,
We know
yeah,
we're not going to be able to
obviously
sign
not.
everybody up. Are we going to find the American people that have been trying to get into Obamacare and have had glitch after glitch after glitch, and we're going to tax them?
Your strategy in delaying it is to let the thing die, is to let Obamacare die, because you know
But it's
that
already been signed, and so
it is. However, it's dependent on the insurance companies, the private insurance companies. You delay it, they are going to opt out.
It's not working though, Jackie. I mean, I think most people
Neither
would like to
did
see it
Medicare
delay.
when it
well,
first
it's not going
started.
very too many
And it
times.
had a lot of glitches in the
And to be
beginning.
fair to Obamacare, there are some good points to it. But you do need to let the system work, but there are many, many glitches, so I don't know if delaying it is necessarily a bad thing.
I'm saying that the strategy that the Republicans have in wanting a delay is to kill it.
Not all.
By the delay.
That's what I want. I mean, but not all Republicans want that. Some really are
That's
like,
right.
it's
There's
not
a
good.
big chasm
But
in
again,
the
we'll
Republican
mention the
Party
polls
right now.
again that 63% are angry at Republicans, 53% at Democrats, and more than half at President Obama. So who's the winner here?
Yeah,
I mean, at this
everyone's
point,
confused. It's very difficult right now. But most people do not want Obamacare still. That is
That's
a
not
fact.
true when you
Yes,
look at the
it
polls.
is. You
It
look at, you're
simply
not looking at the right
isn't.
polls, Jackie. People
Well,
are
I'm
not
looking
happy with
at Pew
Obamacare.
Research. Is that good enough for you?
No, well, no, actually it's not. I mean, most people do
I'm
not
sorry.
want Obamacare.
Okay, we're going to put on
I'll
our
go
PR
with
hats
you.
right now, and everybody's going to get a final word in. Dee Dee, this week we've got a challenging week, obviously, with looking at the debt ceiling. Put on your PR hat. What are you going to tell the Republicans to do?
I think they should stand strong and keep doing the right thing. I mean, look, you can't always rule by the polls. Obamacare is bad. They need to stand strong. It's a bad policy for America. So good luck to them.
Obamacare is a great policy for America. It will cover those uninsured people who cannot afford health care, which is a basic human right. And I would advise the president to hold strong, and I would advise the Republicans to be a little more civil about their negotiations and not let big money rule them.
Paul, after that, you're going to follow those two right there.
Can I plead the fifth?
You gotta go.
When you take a namesake piece of legislation like Obamacare and you put it before the American people before our government. The government is shut down right now, and if we don't reach a spending bill to raise the debt limit, it's because of one piece of legislation, and that's not good.
And again, as we said last week, we obviously don't agree here in this room, so how can we expect the rest of America to agree? All right, thank you very much for your insights, everyone. And certainly a busy week in Washington, D.C. This week, the biggest immigration rally was also held in our nation's capital and nearly every state, resulting in hundreds of arrests, including some lawmakers. We will talk about that when Fresh Outlook returns.